The studio lights of the view burned brighter than usual that morning, casting a sharp glow across the polished table where the hosts sat. Papers neatly stacked, coffee mugs steaming. There was a certain tension in the air, subtle but unmistakable. The audience buzzed with anticipation as whispers rippled through the crowd. Today's guest wasn't just another celebrity doing a routine promo. Jelly Roll had built a reputation for being raw, unfiltered, and impossible to box into polite conversation. Backstage, he adjusted his jacket, taking a slow breath. He wasn't nervous. He'd faced far tougher rooms than this, but he knew what kind of environment he was stepping into. Cameras, opinions, interruptions. He had learned long ago that when people tried to corner him, the best thing to do was stand still and let the truth speak for itself. When he walked out, the applause was loud but mixed, some enthusiastic, some cautious. He smiled warmly, nodding to the crowd, then took his seat. The hosts greeted him with practiced politeness, though there was a certain edge in Joy Behar's tone as she leaned forward slightly, eyes sharp behind her glasses. The conversation started easy enough. His music, his journey, his fans. Jelly Roll spoke openly, his voice calm but steady, each word carrying weight. He talked about struggle, redemption, and finding purpose through pain. The audience listened, drawn in by his sincerity. But then, as if on cue, the tone shifted. Joy tilted her head, lips curling into a faint smirk. "You've had quite a colorful past," she said, emphasizing the phrase just enough to sting. "Do you think people overlook that too easily because of your recent success?" The room grew quieter. Jelly Roll didn't react immediately. He simply looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of measured patience. He'd heard questions like this before, framed, in a way that wasn't really about curiosity, but judgment. "I don't think people overlook it," he replied calmly. "I think they see it." Joy pressed further, sensing the tension building. "But shouldn't there be more accountability? I mean, your past isn't exactly something to celebrate." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Jelly Roll leaned back slightly, folding his hands together. For a brief moment, he seemed to be choosing his words carefully, not to defend himself, but to make sure the message landed exactly where it needed to. "My past isn't something I celebrate," he said slowly, "but it's something I survived." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Joy tried to interject, but he continued, his voice still calm, though now carrying a quiet intensity that began to command the entire room. "You see, it's easy to sit at a table like this and talk about mistakes like they're headlines. But for some of us, those mistakes were our reality. They weren't choices made in comfort, they were made in chaos." The audience had gone completely silent. "Now, and accountability?" he added, looking directly at her. "I've lived it. Every single day. Not just in words, but in actions. In rebuilding relationships. In staying clean. In showing up for people who thought I never would." Joy's expression shifted, the confidence in her posture faltering just slightly. "But here's the thing," he continued, leaning forward just a bit. "People love a comeback story until it makes them uncomfortable. Until they have to accept that someone they wrote off actually changed." A few claps broke out in the audience, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but for once, she didn't seem to have the upper hand. "Well, I just think—" "I know what you think," Jelly Roll said gently, not cutting her off, but stepping into the space before she could take control again. "And that's okay. You're allowed to, but I'm not here to be the person I used to be just so it fits a narrative." The applause grew louder now, more confident. Another host tried to steer the conversation back, sensing the shift. But the energy in the room had already changed. The audience wasn't just watching anymore, they were feeling something real. Joy leaned back in her chair, her usual sharpness replaced with a more guarded expression. For the first time, she seemed unsure of where to go next. Jelly Roll didn't gloat. He didn't smile in victory. Instead, he softened his tone. "I get it," he said. "Not everyone's going to understand my journey, but I'm not asking for approval. I'm just telling the truth." The simplicity of it hit harder than any argument could have. There was a pause, long enough to feel, short enough to keep the moment alive. Then, unexpectedly, the audience rose to their feet. It wasn't planned. It wasn't prompted. It just happened. A standing ovation filled the studio, the sound echoing off the walls. Some people wiped their eyes. Others simply clapped, nodding as if they'd just witnessed something rare. Joy sat still, her lips pressed together, her earlier confidence completely gone. For once, there was no witty comeback, no quick retort. Just silence. The cameras captured everything. The shift in power, the reaction of the crowd. The quiet dignity of a man who didn't need to raise his voice to make himself heard. As the applause slowly faded, Jelly Roll gave a small nod, acknowledging the audience. He didn't look at Joy again. He didn't need to. The rest of the segment moved on, but the energy never fully reset. Something had changed, not just in the room, but in how people saw the moment. When the show cut to commercial, the hosts shuffled their notes, exchanging glances that said more than words could. The usual rhythm of the show had been broken, replaced by something raw and unscripted. Backstage later, crew members whispered about what had just happened. Some called it intense, others called it necessary. But one thing was clear. What was meant to be a challenging interview had turned into something else entirely. Not a humiliation in the loud, dramatic sense, but a quiet, undeniable shift where truth stood its ground and refused to be shaken.